I'm Mary Byers, and this is Associations Today. My guest is Rick Bawcum, CEO of CloudGRUS, a company that specializes in consulting and managed services for associations and nonprofits. I had the privilege of meeting Rick when I was on site for a client retreat. He was attending as well, and we started talking about technology and how it's changing what's happening in the association environment. I'm looking forward to speaking with him today. Rick, associations are notorious for very long approval periods and being a little slow to adopt technology. And you call this a laggard posture, and you say that it's no longer acceptable. Tell me a little bit about that.
Sure, Mary. I get the privilege of working with a lot of associations like you do, and I'm reflecting the language that I hear most often from the association leadership that I work with, where the general feeling is that they're feeling like they're behind. That they're never quite as current as they would like to be. And technology life cycles these days are measured in weeks and months, not years and decades as they used to be. The typical association budgeting life cycle, most of them work on an annual budget cycle. Oftentimes they don't think about technology until it's time to think about the budget. They're in the last quarter of their year. They start thinking about making a list for all the things that they saw during the year that they might like to implement. And when you've got a technology life cycle that's measured in weeks and months, you've got a pretty long delay before people can get budgets in place, get projects started, and oftentimes you're looking at 18 to 24 months, is my experience in the association world, to get a project approved. And oftentimes that's way too slow to meet the expectations of our members.
So does it make sense for associations to have a technology budget, maybe knowing that even though the budget cycle might be a year, to get approval for a project, knowing that it may be phased in, and just always reserving some funds? Is that what you're seeing associations do, or how are your clients solving that problem?
Absolutely. I think the old model of assuming that we're going to invest in technology and then not invest for 3 or 4 or 5 years is passé. There's no way to function that way anymore. I think that associations have to include a dedicated budget for their IT and their technology initiatives, and it needs to be geared towards innovative and more agile approaches about how they approach their technology projects. We can't just invest and put the big capital expenditures together that we used to and then leave them alone. I always talk about the technology people. My background is technology, but my academics were all about HR, finance, and business administration. I always say that you have to have those technology people at the table when you're having those strategic conversations about the business goals that the association is trying to meet. It's often much flatter in terms of the time to market when you have those folks at the table early in the game. So if you're thinking about your budgets on a continuous basis and maybe not necessarily applying it to a specific project, but making that money available and those resources available on an ongoing basis.
So one of my questions was actually going to be, what advice would you give to IT professionals and the CEOs that they work with? But it sounds like to me that one piece of advice would be that they have to be at the table, not on the back end, but actually before any kind of technology decisions are made. What other advice would you give?
We talk a lot about the cloud, as is implied in our name, obviously. I tell people to run, don't walk towards the cloud. The cloud was the game changer of the last 3 to 5 years. We're going to see the Internet of Things make that same magnitude of change. And that's a newer conversation that we're having about the billions of connected devices that are going to be coming online in the next 5 years. But I tell people to change the way they attack the cost model for IT. Again, we typically have thought about IT as being an investment that we make large, chunky investments in every 3 to 4 to 5 years. The cloud and the IT and as-a-service models change the game there. Well, we ought to be asking and demanding in the new IT projects, we ought to be looking for pay-as-you-go models. So I say run, don't walk to the cloud, and as a generalization, look for as-a-service models. Managed services models are a great opportunity for folks to change the game from CapEx to OpEx and pay-as-you-go.
And when you talk about managed services, for those who might not be familiar with that, could you just quickly define that?
The easiest way to define it, we used to call it outsourcing. If you were looking for What your IT groups typically do today is they're spending 80% of their time, these are statistics gathered over a lot of years, they spend 80% of their time fixing things. Blinking lights is what I always refer to. You can change the game by using a managed service or a cloud model or a software as a service or IT as a service model to refocus your internal IT on the strategic things so that they're now spending 80% of their time on strategic projects, new and innovative life cycles and new products and services for your members. And outsource or get rid of all of that blinking lights function to someone else. There's lots of great opportunities out there to do that these days.
Let's talk about the generational issue and how that's impacting associations. We have 4 generations living, working, and coexisting in associations today, and obviously that's a challenge. So talk a little bit about that from your perspective.
Sure. I think that, frankly, I think the generational issue or the adoption for generation to generation is a bit overblown. I think, I have relatives who are in their 80s who are constantly on their iPads and their smartphones, right? So I think the issue more now is less about generation in terms of how old we are. It's more about the platform that we choose to consume upon. If we don't meet our members on their smartphones, on their tablets, on their PCs or Macs, if we don't meet them on the platform that they choose to be on, we're missing the boat. The analogy I would use is, you can use Netflix. They can send you DVDs every month, or you can consume it on your iPad. It's a platform choice, not a generational choice, in my view.
I love that. That's a great way to frame it in terms of it doesn't have to be an either or in terms of which generation we're meeting. It has really more to do, as you said, what platform they're on, but maybe also the speed with which new technology is being adapted, and that does complicate things for associations. One of the things that we tell associations is that they need to know their members. Right. And from your perspective, what key 3 things should associations be aware of? I mean, you just mentioned one, and that is what platform are your members using? How are they grabbing what's out there and the content that we're providing for them? But what else should they be thinking about?
Yeah, I'm always amazed, actually, in the assessment work that I do every year with associations, how little they know about the data they already have. Most of us have adopted AMSs and LMSs and CMSs and CRMs and all of the other acronyms that are out there, and we have data floating around in these lakes that are, I call them dark lakes, or we don't really know what's in them. We don't really spend the time to understand exactly what data we already have. And we miss opportunities every time we encounter our membership, whether it's online in our mobile apps or at our events. We miss opportunities to collect more data and know our members better. So I would tell the associations, and I do, and the folks that I work with, develop a competency around not just data, because that sounds geeky, but develop a competency around analytics, understand what your members are telling you, understand when you record something about that member, what it means in the context of your association.
As we wrap up, let's talk a little bit about the sharing economy and how that is changing the game and changing the environment for associations, or is it changing?
I think it is. When all of us, you and I travel a lot, so I use Uber all the time, Waze. If I go to Disney, those folks know where I am every moment. I think the sharing economy, a little bit of definition about that means, the sharing economy for me means that we're willing to trade information about ourselves, our location, our credit card information, demographic information about ourselves for convenience or comfort or efficiency. As we use applications like Uber and Waze and those kinds of applications, our expectations change. No longer are we going to be able to, we don't want to show up at events and have just the generic program guide, right? We want information channeled to us and funneled to us that's contextual. It knows our profile. It knows, which conferences we've been to in the past, maybe what sessions I've been to, and it's going to direct me and guide me in a much more intuitive way. And that's what the sharing economy is all about. Members are willing to share information if they see the benefit, and that's the basic premise of the sharing economy. We'll trade things for things that we see of value.
So, last question. Mm-hmm. Some associations really believe that they can't afford technology. And give us some words of wisdom. If we have a viewer that's with an association and they haven't budgeted regularly, they feel like it's not an overcomable obstacle, what would you say to them?
So I think there's, again, I keep going back to the cloud, and we've included that in our name and our company, but that changes the game. The old model of having to marshal a large sum of money to buy a new whatever, AMS, CMS, network, more storage, those kinds of things, that game has changed. And now we are in pay-as-you-go models, which means that we now have a much lower cost. And it changes the game about how we finance it. So I think all of the vendors that I have worked with in the AMS world, for example, have moved to models that are much more cost efficient. There's not these huge investments on the front end. Some still do, and some choose to implement it that way. But the models have really flattened out from a cost perspective. So if they haven't revisited the model in terms of how to go about buying whatever it is their organization needs, I would say now's the time to do it, because the last couple of years have really changed the game from a cost perspective.
Great advice, Rick. Thanks for your time and your expertise today. Much appreciated.